Okay? Alright, so like I said, we're going to start the cool scale first. So I'm going to show you guys what colors I'm using. I want to kind of zoom in on this just a little bit so it's a little bit easier to see. Try to get it there. As big as I can get it. Alright, so colors I'm going to use. I am going to use white. Okay? So there's white. I'm going to use a light blue. It's actually called pale blue on the stick, but you can pick whatever light blue that you have in your set. It may or may not be in the small sets. It may actually be in the big set, and if it's in the big set, again, you're going to have to share. Those big sets cost more, so I can't afford to buy everybody their own. The next color I'm going to use is Cobalt Blue, which is sort of like your standard blue color, or primary blue. Cobalt Blue is a good, solid primary blue in paint, also too, colored pencils, any media. And then the dark blue I'm going to use is a color called Prussian Blue. There is another dark blue in the set. It's ultramarine blue, but I'm not going to use that because actually, I don't know if you can kind of tell in the video or up here on the Epson. And it's a little hard to tell. But the one here on the left, that's my Prussian blue, and then the one on the right's ultramarine. The ultramarine looks a little bright to me, so I'm going to choose the darker one. Now, let's say I didn't have a Prussian blue. I could actually very easily use the ultramarine blue and mix it with some black to make it darker. So. And then the last color I'm going to use is black. Okay? So those are the four I'm going to use. I'll go through those as I use them again, so don't get worried if you don't have all these colors sitting in front of you right now. Okay? Because again, some of these colors you may have to share. Alright, so the first thing I'm going to start with is my white. Now, number one mistake people make when they start with oil pastels is that because this stuff is so soft, that they make the mistake of putting too much of the oil pastel down at once. We want to create layers of color, and we want to build it up in a very slow process. That way, when you're finished with this, the colors are just a lot richer and a lot deeper looking rather than just looking very flat, like a coloring book, okay? So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take my paper towel, and if you guys look at my white here, I've got other colors on there. And it's just from whoever used it previously. So what I'm going to do first is just kind of clean it off with my paper towel. So I just do that by just kind of rolling the oil pastel in the paper towel. So that's why you have the paper towel in your hand. And that'll prevent you from getting any colors you don't want down on your paper. And then what I'm going to do, I'm just going to very carefully start laying down a thin layer. And when I say thin, I mean thin. A thin layer of oil pastel down in this first box, okay? You want to try very hard to stay within the lines here, because remember, it doesn't matter if this is a project or not, craftsmanship is always important, okay? So take this thin layer of oil pastel all the way through to the third box, and I'm going to stop at the third box. And you can see a lot of paper still showing through. And that's the look I want. Now, if I were to press real hard on this oil pastel, I would fill the tooth of my paper up to the point where I wouldn't be able to add any more colors or layers to this. And then you'd just see the color would look really flat. So you do get to a point with the oil pastels where you build it up so much you just can't make any changes to it. So that's why it's important to stay thin to begin with. And then as you kind of figure out things, you'll build it up. All right, so I'm done with my thin layer of white over the first three boxes. Now I'm going to grab that light blue. It's called pale blue again. So I'm going to start this pale blue. And now I'm going to take this through. I'm going to start this now in box 2. And again, thin layer. Thin layer. So I'm not pressing hard at all. I'm basically just dragging the oil pastel across the paper and letting whatever oil pastel goes down, let it go down. But I'm going to take this from box 2 all the way down to box 3.
Is this recycled paper?
I think it might be.
I know that's random, but like, just because of the way the paper, like, you guys have like, I don't know, have like these little flyaways.
It might be, yeah. This paper works really well. Whenever you're working with something like oil pastel, charcoal, soft pastels, you want to work on a paper that's got a bit of texture to it, and a lot of people refer to that as tooth. Now, if I were to be working on a paper that was real smooth, again, I wouldn't have the opportunity to build up the layers. So you'd put a thin layer down, and then you wouldn't be able to make any changes after that. Now, if you guys see, okay, so I've already put that pale blue from box 2 all the way down to 3. Now, if you remember, in box 2 and 3, I already have a layer of white on there. So look at how it's different from box number 4. Box number 4, I just have the pale blue on there. Okay? So this is why it's important. I've already talked to you guys about this. If you ever want to make a color look bright or light, you want to start with white first underneath it. So you can see how that pale blue looks different between box 3 and 4. Yeah?
Is the pale blue called pale blue? Is it called like pale blue?
No, it's called pale blue on the label.
Alright.
It just looks like a light blue.
And then you use
So what I've done so far, again, is I took the white. I'm just going to draw these lines here. I took the white, layer of white from the first to the third box. And then I took a layer of the pale blue from the second to the third box. Again, you don't have to do those lines if you don't want to, but some people like to. It just helps them keep track of what they're doing. But I put that there just so you guys can see what I'm doing. All right, so the next thing I'm going to do, I'm going to go ahead and, I think I'll do, yeah. So the next thing I'm going to do now, I'm going to start with my Cobalt Blue. So this is like what I would call your primary blue color. It's not too light, not too dark, just right in the middle. Again, make sure you clean these oil pastels off before you use them. You may get a color on there you didn't want, so just kind of twist it in that paper towel. And so now what I'm going to do, you guys notice the theme here. My first layer started in box 1. My second layer started in box 2. Where's this third layer going to start? Box 3. So again, thin layer. Real thin. I'm actually going to take this all the way down to the end. So this, just because I want blue underneath all of it, and since this is like a middle tone blue, I can take it all the way down. If I put light blue all the way down to 7, then everything's going to look too light down here. I can make a medium tone darker easier than a light. So again, thin layer, guys. We're not putting any pressure down on these oil pastels. Big mistake a lot of people make when they use the oil pastels. Now, if you're an artist and you work primarily with oil pastels, you know, these are people that practice and use this stuff every day. They're really good at knowing what they need and how to get it. So a lot of times you'll see, you know, professional artists, they'll go ahead and put some pressure down, but, you know, they know what they're doing. They've got more practice. Personally, regardless of how much experience I have, I'm always going to start, and it doesn't matter what media I'm working in, I'm always going to start with the thin layer because I like to play around with what I'm doing. I like to try different things, and if the media is on there real thin, it gives me an opportunity to fix it up, change it, take it off if I need to. So it just gives me more to experiment with. Okay. So again, I took this Cobalt Blue from box 3 all the way down to 7. And it's also too important to say, guys, like there's more than one way to do this. I mean, I could do this 5 million different ways with these colors, try different kinds of blues, and probably still get the same result. So, all right, so the next thing I'm going to do, now I'm in box 5 I'm going to do another layer of this Cobalt Blue. And again, I'm going to start in 1, 2, 3, oh, I'm in box 4, sorry. I'm going to start in box 4 and take it all the way down to 7. So now I have 2 layers of this Cobalt Blue. Yeah, and 2, you'll notice that even with this box number 4 here, because we have, let's see here, we have 2, this will be our 3rd layer in there. You'll start to see that the more layers you add, the more that they start to blend together. So this is why I say there is no reason why you should be taking your finger into this stuff and smushing it all together. Let the oil pastel do all the work for you. You take your finger in there and you start moving and smudging that stuff around, it's going to look like a cloud and you're going to lose all your definition. And you're actually removing the media rather than mixing it up. So, got to be careful with that. Get out of that habit if that's something you do. All right. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to go now to, let's see here, 1, 2, 3, 4, now box 5. Yep, box 5. And now I'm going to go in with my Prussian Blue. So this is that darker blue. Now again, if I wanted to, I could probably use ultramarine blue too. But I'm going to use the Prussian. It's a little bit darker. Again, thin layer. If you need to share, you might have to wait. This Prussian Blue is like golden here because this is the color everybody wants to darken up all their dark areas on their project. So this is what, if you think you need to grab a black, this is what you should be grabbing for instead, is the Prussian Blue. It's a nice dark cool tone. Now technically the darkest color on your color wheel is violet, but a lot of times violet tends to be even a little too bright when they manufacture it, so 9 times out of 10 your go-to dark is going to be a dark blue. Prussian blue is a good dark, indigo blue is another good dark. So once I do that, then I'm going to, in box 6, I'm going to do another layer of this Prussian Blue. So I used the Cobalt Blue twice, and I am using the Prussian Blue twice.
And 6 though?
Yep, 6 to 7. So I'm going to do a thin layer. All right, and then last box, box number 7, this is when I am going to put down some black, okay? So I'm going to do, again, very thin layer because the black does, it makes big changes. Add a very thin layer of black on here. And so that's what I have so far, okay? It's not finished because, in the way you can tell it's not finished is because you can still see through the paper. So this is what you would call a non-burnished surface, okay? And you can tell that it's not burnished because you can still see the paper through the media, okay? So when it is burnished, all of that paper will be covered up. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back through, and now I'm going to make adjustments. Okay, now I'm going to commit to what I've got going. Now your first box is always going to be white, okay? It's going to be your lightest value. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is just take my white oil pastel, and I'm just going to go ahead now and fill this in. I'm going to use some pressure. And see, this is again why it's really important for you guys to keep your media thin, because now, and as you can see even on mine, I have some adjustments I need to make. It's not perfect, but because I still have room to build media up on my paper, I can make those changes. Now, if you put too much pressure on your oil pastel at the beginning, it's not going to happen. So I am now putting some pressure down, especially in this white. I'm not going to be adding any other colors in this area. So you'll notice too, sometimes you get little bits and pieces of the oil pastel that sit on top of the paper, and you just brush those off. All right. And then I'm going to go back over, at least with my, I want the key with the value scale is that you see gradual and equal changes from one square to another. So there's like this area right here, there's not much difference between those, so I'm going to have to address that. When I look at these two, there's almost too much. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a layer of white back on top of this. Now not everybody may need to do this. Maybe yours looks too light and you need to add more light blue on there. But now I'm going to, because I need a lighten, I'm going to put a little layer of white on top of this. And again, I'm going to go ahead and add a little bit of pressure to this, and look, you can see that it start blending. It's because I'm just putting more layers on. It's not necessary to take your finger in this thing and start smushing all this stuff together. And that white and light blue are mixing together now. So this is how you blend. You just layer, and you let the oil pastel do all the work for you. I'm still going to leave a little room there. I'm not going to fill up all my paper here, because I want to still be able to make changes if I want to. All right, so now what I'm going to do, I feel like this might be too dark. I'm going to go back over this with my light blue. Not with my white, because if I do with my white, it's probably going to get too light. So I'm just going to go back over with my light blue. So basically from this point forward, now you guys are going through and you're making adjustments and changes, your formula and problem might be different than mine. So don't necessarily follow what I'm doing. Follow what you think your piece needs. We might have two different problems on our hands, which then requires two different solutions. Again, I'm still going to give myself a little room to make these adjustments. I'm not going to go ahead and fill that quite in yet. And I might actually put a little bit more blue in this guy. And see, now that I see those three together, I'm going to put a little bit of blue in there. Light blue. There, I like that better. So again, look at them, compare them together, ask yourself what each one needs. When you're finished with this, the surface should look all burnished, which means that you do not see any of the paper showing through your media. So compare and contrast. Figure out which each one needs. Layer them up. As you commit to what you need to do, you can put more pressure down on your oil pastel.
We're doing the same thing with the watercolors, right?
Yeah, but I haven't done those yet. Yeah. Yeah. Again, get picky about this stuff, guys. This is where your practice is. Now, on Monday, you need to make sure that your drawings are finished. So for those of you that did not get your drawing finished during block day, your assignment for this weekend is to get your drawing done on your big paper. You need to have that finished and done before you walk in here on Monday. Whatever you do, do not forget your stuff at home. Big problem if you do. Now Monday, what we're going to do is we're actually going to start a little practice quad. So we're going to pick a quad on our photo and we're going to just do a little thumbnail of it basically and test out like how do I start, it gives you a chance to just practice parts of your photograph. So there's my finished one. So you guys can see. So now what I'm going to do is just go ahead and put my blues away. And I'm going to start my warm color scale. So kind of move this up so you guys can see this a little better. All right, so for the warm, I am going to use white. And in your sets, there's a couple different yellows, okay? Just kind of a really light pale yellow and a more saturated yellow. I'm going to be using the lemon yellow, which is darker, lighter. You can see, here's the two yellows. I'm going to be using the lighter one. The only reason why is just because it's probably going to be on the lighter part of it. I'm going to use then the yellow-orange. Let that focus. So yellow-orange. There is a darker orange, but again, I'm just going to use the lighter one.
You're using the lemon yellow?
Yep, lemon yellow.
Lighter orange versus the other?
Lighter orange. So I have the white, lemon yellow, yellow orange, and I'll go through these names again before I use them. There are two different kinds of reds. There is a vermilion hue, which is kind of like an orangey red color, and then just straight up red. I'm going to use just the straight up red. And this might be what kind of shocks you guys here. And then I'm going to use that Prussian Blue. So again, that's that dark blue. Again, if you don't have the Prussian Blue, you can use the ultramarine blue. So those are the colors I'm going to use for the warm scale. All right. So now I'm going to just kind of remove this stuff off, put it off to the side. What color am I going to start with? White. Okay, I'm going to take this again, same thing. I'm going to take this from the first box all the way down to third. Thin layer. Now you got to make sure, guys, I know we just we worked on that cool one, and when you, in the finishing stages, that you're using pressure, so go back to using very light pressure. So thin layer, you guys can see how much paper I have still showing through the white. Just simply letting that white just glide across the paper, and the paper's just grabbing whatever it can. So again, a layer of white through the first three. What do you think is my next color?
Lemon yellow.
Lemon yellow. I'm going to start second box and go all the way through 3 and 4. Again, thin layer. So this is the lemon yellow. You can already tell now that we have white underneath there how it kind of brightens. I mean, just look at that. You can tell a difference when the sticks, it's very bright. So that's the trick to brightening up your stuff, is start with a layer of yellow. Or I'm sorry, start with a layer of white. Layer of white. And then you can see here what the lemon yellow looks like just on its own on top of the gray paper. So you can just see how much darker it looks. And trust me, there's a difference between putting white under a color and then adding white on top of a color. You will never get as bright if you try to just add it on the top. So if you forget it, it can be a bad thing. You just aren't going to get the brightness that you wanted. So this was the lemon yellow, box 2, 3, and 4. Okay, what's next? Yellow orange. Now we are going to take this from box 3, 4, and 5. That's it. Now I'll tell you at the end of this why I didn't take the orange all the way down. Well, maybe some of you guys will guess. Who remembers what the darkest color was that I'm going to use on this scale? What's the darkest color I pulled? The Prussian blue. So blue and orange are what? Complements. There we go. So if I were to mix, if I were to have orange underneath this, and I'm putting blue on top of that last one, I'm going to get brown. Not dark red. I'm going to get brown. I don't want brown. So you got to think ahead. This is where, again, you got to work beyond those awesome test questions, those favorite test questions art teachers all like to ask. What are complements? Not only that, you need to know how to use it. Okay, what's next? Yeah, the red. So again, this is just straight up red. Now I am going to take this from box, let's see here, 4 all the way down to 7. Okay? Thin layer. And I can already see some mixing happening and blending because now I've got some layers down. Again, look at the difference between how your red looks with that layer of yellow-orange underneath it and just the red straight on the gray paper. Very different.
Take the red all the way down.
Yep, all the way down. If you think about it, with your warm colors, you've got yellow, orange, and red. What's your darkest one in all of that? Red. So anytime you need to darken up a yellow or an orange, you're going to grab what? Red. Okay. So now what I'm going to do, let's see here, box 5, I'm going to do another layer of red. So a second layer of red from box 5 down to 7. Okay, so now, next color. What do I have left now to use? Prussian Blue. So I'm going to use a thin layer here from box 6 to 7. This is going to start darkening up my red that's underneath. Now, I'm not sure, but it could be when everything's all said and done, I may need to splash a little bit of black here in this last box, but I'm going to hold off on it until I see how things play out. Push comes to shove, I can always put some black in there. But with the cool scale that I had there at the top, black and blue work really well together. So I'm going to do that almost every time I'm using blue. And I want to darken it. All right, so to finish it off, I'm going to do another layer of this Prussian Blue just here in box number 7. Yep, another layer of Prussian Blue, box 7. Okay, so that's what I've got so far. So now again, you go back and now you got to commit and tweak it. Okay, so look at how this stuff looks. Again, one of my favorite tricks when I'm checking my work, especially on a scale, of course now it's not zooming, there we go, is I block off the 2 at a time and I look at it. I want to see equal steps between each box all the way down. And it helps me, you know, if there's 2 that are really close together, then I know what I need to do. I need to make some adjustments, okay? So my next step now is, again, to go back through. Something needs to be lighter. I'm not going to necessarily always go to white, but maybe I'll just go to lighter color to place on top. I don't necessarily, you know, if I need to lighten this up, I'm not going to put white on there. That's just silly. I might put orange instead, okay, to lighten it up. All right, so I'm going to go back through. I'm going to start fixing this up and finishing it. I'm not going to necessarily talk through it because at this point I want you guys to start making decisions on your own. But you can always, you know, take a minute and look up here if you need to. If you're having problems filling the tooth of the paper when you're ready to burnish and commit to your colors, just go back and forth over the paper in different directions and that should help fill in the tooth. Other than that, I'm just going to continue to go through, make adjustments, and finish up this scale. You won't get a chance to see this one finished on this demo, but you should know what you're doing at this point. If you have any questions, just let me know. Thanks a lot, guys.